The name on her assignment sheet made Nira's two hearts stop beating for a full second. Daniel Wright. Human. She read it again, hoping the translator in her neural implant had made an error. But the letters remained the same. Her laboratory partner for the entire semester would be a human. A Deathworlder. A creature from a planet so violent that its inhabitants had evolved to run prey to death, to consume poison for pleasure, to bond with apex predators as pets. Nira's translucent blue-gray skin flushed darker with fear. The gill slits along her neck fluttered rapidly, trying to pull more oxygen from the station's recycled air. Her large dark eyes scanned the laboratory, searching for the monster she had been assigned to work with. She found him at Station 7. He was smaller than she expected. The stories described humans as towering predators, but this one stood only slightly taller than her. He had soft brown skin, dark hair cut short, and eyes that seemed to hold a quiet patience. He was arranging sample containers with careful precision, his movements slow and deliberate. Nira approached Professor Kellos instead. The elderly, Thranish academic looked down at her with all four of his arms folded across his bark-like chest. "Professor, there must be some mistake," Nira whispered. "My partner assignment." "There is no mistake, student Nira. But he is human. Surely you understand the danger. My species is fragile compared to Deathworlders. His sweat contains toxins. His body temperature alone could what?" Professor Kellos interrupted. "Could teach you something about interspecies cooperation. Could challenge the assumptions your homeworld has fed you since birth." He leaned closer, his ancient eyes softening. "The Galactic Academy exists to bridge differences, not reinforce them. Your request for transfer is denied." Nira returned to Station 7 with trembling hands. Daniel looked up as she approached. He did not smile. He did not reach out to touch her. He simply nodded once and took a small step backward, creating more space between them. "You must be Nira," he said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "I read your research on aquatic flora adaptation. It was brilliant." She did not know how to respond to a compliment from a predator. "I thought we could work on opposite ends of the station," Daniel continued. "I will handle the samples from high-gravity worlds. You can focus on the aquatic specimens. We only need to meet in the middle for data comparison." He was offering her distance. Safety. Nira had not expected that. "That is acceptable," she managed. The first week passed in tense silence. Nira watched Daniel from the corner of her large eyes, cataloging his movements, searching for signs of the predator within. But he never moved suddenly. He never raised his voice. When he needed to pass near her, he would clear his throat softly first, giving her warning. Other students noticed her situation. During meal periods, they gathered around her with warnings and horror stories. "Humans can run for entire days without stopping," a Krellish student told her. "Their ancestors would chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They drink caffeine," another added, shuddering, "and ethanol. They consume capsaicin, a chemical designed by plants specifically to cause pain. I heard they keep predators in their homes," Sarah, Nira's serpentine helixin roommate, added. "Animals with claws and teeth. They call them pets and let them sleep in their beds." Nira listened to every warning. She memorized every fact. She knew she was sharing a laboratory with one of the most dangerous species in the known galaxy. But then she noticed something strange. Daniel always stayed late after their sessions ended. At first, Nira assumed he was conducting secret experiments or perhaps plotting something sinister. But one evening, her curiosity overcame her fear. She crept back to the laboratory and watched through the observation window. Daniel was talking to the plants, not in any scientific manner, not recording observations or analyzing responses. He was simply speaking to them, the way one might speak to a frightened child. "I know it is hard being so far from home," he murmured to a small flowering specimen from a distant world. "The light here is not quite right, and the soil does not smell familiar. But you're doing so well. Look at this new leaf. You should be proud." His hands moved with impossible gentleness as he adjusted the grow lights, tested the moisture levels, pruned a damaged stem with surgical precision. Nira had been taught that humans were survivors, conquerors. endurance predators who had clawed their way to the top of their world's food chain through sheer stubborn violence. No one had mentioned they talked to plants. No one had mentioned they could be gentle. She watched until Daniel finished his work, gathered his materials, and left through the far exit. He never knew she was there. As she walked back to her dormitory, Nira realized that for the first time since receiving her assignment, her hearts were beating at a normal rhythm. The predator was still dangerous. The stories were still true. But perhaps there were parts of the story no one had bothered to tell her. She fell asleep that night thinking about a human's hands, scarred and calloused from a harsh world, touching flower petals like they were something precious. 2 weeks changed nothing and everything. Nira still kept her distance from Daniel. She still flinched when he moved too quickly. She still counted the exits whenever they worked together. But somewhere beneath her fear, a small seed of doubt had taken root. Doubt about everything she had been taught. Their project had progressed smoothly. They were cataloging potentially toxic flora from various homeworlds, a task that required precision, patience, and careful handling. Daniel excelled at all three. Nira found herself almost forgetting to be afraid when they discussed pollen structures or debated classification systems. Almost. The accident happened on a quiet afternoon. A Krellish student named Vorton was carrying a tray of specimens across the laboratory. He moved too fast near Station 4, caught his foot on a power cable, and crashed directly into the shelf holding Nira's contribution to the project. The Valeshi water orchids. Nira watched in horror as the container shattered against the floor. The orchids, delicate flowers from her own homeworld, began releasing clouds of distressed spores. It was a survival mechanism meant to signal other plants and attract help. On Valesh, the spores were carried away by ocean currents, harmless and beautiful. In an enclosed laboratory, they were a death sentence. Concentrated distress spores could overwhelm Valeshi respiratory systems in minutes. Nira's gill slits began to close instinctively, but she knew it would not be enough. She needed to evacuate. She needed to run. She did not see Daniel move. One moment, he was at his station across the room. The next, he was on the floor, his body thrown over the broken container, his jacket stripped off and wrapped around the spilling flowers. He was containing the release with his own mass, pressing down to smother the spore production. The orchids fought back. Their distress intensified. Chemical compounds meant to repel predators began burning through Daniel's thin shirt, raising red welts on his forearms and hands. Nira could see his jaw tightening with pain, but he did not let go. "Nira, get the containment unit," he said through gritted teeth. "The silver box on shelf 3. Hurry." She moved before her mind could process what was happening. Her hands found the containment unit, activated its seal mechanism, and rushed back to Daniel. Together, they transferred the damaged orchids into the protective case. The spore release stopped. The air began to clear. Daniel sat back on his heels, cradling his burned hands. His palms were covered in chemical welts, already blistering. The pain must have been severe, but he looked at the containment unit with something like relief. "They survived," he said. "Good. They were too beautiful to lose." Nira stared at him. "You could have let them die," she whispered. "They're just plants. They are not even from your world." Daniel looked up at her with tired eyes. "Plants from your world are beautiful. Seemed wrong to let them die when they were just scared." Scared. He had described the orchids as scared. Administrator Vosk arrived moments later, his tall frame casting a shadow over the scene. The Grinthic administrator had 4 cold eyes that fixed immediately on Daniel. "What happened here?" "Human, explain yourself." Daniel began to speak, but Vorton interrupted. "He saved the specimens, Administrator. The container broke, and the human contained the release. He saved the Valeshi student, too." Vosk's eyes narrowed. "I see. And these injuries?" "Chemical burns from the spores," Daniel said simply. "The medical station can treat them." Vosk studied Daniel for a long moment, suspicion clear in every line of his body. But he could find nothing to punish. Finally, he turned and left without another word. Nira helped Daniel to his feet. His hands were shaking now, the adrenaline fading, the pain setting in. She guided him to the medical station where automated systems began treating his wounds. "Thank you," she said quietly. It was the first time she had initiated conversation with him. Daniel shrugged with his bandaged hands. "Partners help each other. That is the point of partnership, right? But we are not. I have not been." Nira struggled to find words. "I have not treated you like a partner. I have treated you like a threat." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know. I understand why. My species has a reputation in this galaxy, and most of it is earned. We are survivors from a harsh world. We can be dangerous." He paused, looking at his injured hands. "But we can also choose when to be dangerous and when to be gentle. Most humans choose gentleness more often than you might think." Nira watched him return to the laboratory after his treatment was complete. His hands were wrapped in healing gel, clumsy and awkward, but he went straight back to work. He checked on the contained orchids first, adjusting their light and temperature, ensuring they would recover from their trauma. She watched him tend to flowers from her world with more care than many of her own people would show. That night, Nira told Sarah what had happened. "He burned himself for plants," Sarah said, disbelief clear in her hissing voice. "He burned himself for my plants," Nira corrected. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Perhaps," she said finally, "the stories do not tell us everything about humans." Nira thought about Daniel's hands, gentle on flower petals, burned now because he chose to protect something fragile and foreign. She thought about his words. "We can choose when to be gentle." "No," she agreed. "The stories do not tell us everything." The invitation came on a day when Nira realized she had defended Daniel 3 times before noon. First in the dining hall, when a Threxian student called humans genetic accidents. Then in the corridor, when a group of first-years whispered about the Death Worlder in Laboratory 7. And finally in her own dormitory, when Sarah questioned why Nira spent so much time near the human. "I'm simply stating facts," Nira had said each time. "He saved my life. He is a competent researcher. The prejudice against his species is not supported by my observations." But somewhere between the first defense and the third, she stopped pretending she was being objective. Daniel found her in the library that evening, surrounded by data tablets and research papers. He approached slowly, as he always did, giving her time to notice him. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "But please feel free to say no. I will not be offended." Nira looked up. "What is it?" "I work part-time in the Xenobotany greenhouse. The Earth section. I thought, maybe you would like to see it." He hesitated. "It is in quarantine, so not many students get access. But I can bring a guest. You could bring your roommate too, if that makes you more comfortable." The Earth section. The place where they grew plants from the Death World. Nira's instinct screamed at her to refuse. Every lesson from her childhood warned her away from anything that came from that violent planet. But her heart remembered Daniel's burned hands and his soft voice talking to frightened flowers. "Yes," she said before she could change her mind. "I would like to see it." Sarah was horrified when Nira told her. "You want to walk into a room full of poisoned plants from the Death World, with only a human as your guide?" "You are coming too," Nira reminded her. "That does not make it better." But Sarah came anyway, her serpentine body coiled tightly with tension as they followed Daniel through the quarantine protocols. Decontamination chambers, biometric scans, warning signs in 17 languages. Then Daniel opened the inner door, and Nira forgot how to breathe. The greenhouse was beautiful. Soft light filtered through climate-controlled panels, casting everything in warm gold. The air was humid but gentle, carrying scents that Nira had never encountered before. Green dominated the space, so many shades of green, interrupted by bursts of purple and white and pink. "These are from Earth?" Sarah asked, her voice small. Daniel nodded, leading them down a narrow path between raised beds. "Most of these species have been grown on the station for decades. Earth plants are actually quite adaptable. They just need someone to understand what they need." He stopped beside a bed of small purple flowers. "This is lavender. Humans use it for medicine, for sleep, for relaxation. The scent calms our nervous system." Nira leaned closer, inhaling carefully. The smell was clean and somehow soft, like the feeling of safety given form. And this, Daniel continued, moving to a cluster of white blooms, is chamomile. We dry the flowers and make tea from them. It helps with anxiety, with stomach problems, with sleeplessness. You drink your plants? Sarah asked. We do many things with our plants. We eat them, drink them, smell them, give them as gifts to people we care about. On Earth, bringing someone flowers is a way of saying you are thinking of them. He led them deeper into the greenhouse, explaining each species with quiet enthusiasm. Mint that humans use to settle their stomachs. Roses that they gave to romantic partners. Sunflowers that turned to follow the light. Finally, they reached a corner where small, white, star-shaped flowers climbed up a trellis. The scent was sweet and almost hypnotic. This is jasmine, Daniel said. It is one of my favorites. Nira reached toward the delicate petals, then stopped. Is this poisonous? Daniel smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him, soft and warm. This one is actually gentle, he said. Humans use it to help us sleep, to calm our nerves. We put in tea. The scent alone can reduce stress levels. Nira touched the flower. The petals were impossibly soft, like touching water. Nothing burned. Nothing stung. It simply existed, small and white and sweet. I do not understand, she said quietly. Your world is supposed to be violent. Everything there is supposed to be competing to kill everything else. How do plants like this survive? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Everything on Earth is competing in a way. But competition is not the same as violence. These plants survive because they found ways to cooperate. With insects that pollinate them. With humans who cultivated them. With the soil and the sun and the rain. He paused. Humans are the same. Our world is harsh. But we survive by learning to work together, to care for things beyond ourselves. We are not just predators. We are also gardeners. Sarah had uncurled slightly, her head moving between the flowers with growing interest. This is not what I expected from a death world. Most species expect blood and teeth, Daniel said. They forget that Earth also created seeds and flowers and the humans who learned to love them. Nira stood in the gentle light, surrounded by the sweet scent of jasmine, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not just trust, not just understanding, something deeper that she could not yet name. Thank you, she said to Daniel, for showing us this. He nodded, that soft smile still on his face. Thank you for being willing to see it. They left the greenhouse as the station's lights dimmed toward night cycle. Nira carried the scent of jasmine with her all the way back to her dormitory, where it lingered in her dreams until morning. Nira could not stop thinking about food. Not just any food, human food. The thing she had feared more than anything else about the Death Worlders. She had heard the stories so many times that they lived in her mind like truth carved in stone. Humans ate capsaicin, a chemical designed by plants specifically to cause pain. They drank caffeine, a stimulant that would kill most galactic species in moderate doses. They consumed ethanol, a literal poison, and called it celebration. Their cuisine was built on substances that should not sustain life. But Daniel had shown her jasmine and chamomile and lavender. Plants meant for healing, for comfort, for peace. If his people could grow gentle flowers, could they also cook gentle food? She found him in the laboratory after hours, updating their research logs. I have a question, she said, about human food. Daniel looked up, surprised. What would you like to know? Is it all poison? The capsaicin and caffeine and ethanol that everyone talks about? Or are those just... She struggled to find the word. Options. Daniel set down his tablet. They are options. Many humans never consume any of those things. And even for those who do, we adjust our cooking based on who we are feeding. He paused, studying her face. Are you asking because you want to try human food? Nira's gill slits fluttered with nervous energy. I do not know. Perhaps. I am curious. I could cook something for you, Daniel offered. Something safe. Something gentle. No capsaicin, no caffeine, nothing that would harm a Valeshi's system. Would you be willing to try it? Sarah declared Nira insane when she heard the plan. You're going to let a Death Worlder prepare your food? What if he makes a mistake? What if something that is gentle to humans is deadly to you? Then I will die having satisfied my curiosity, Nereus said, surprised by her own calm. The common area was nearly empty when Daniel began cooking. He had reserved one of the small preparation stations, spreading out ingredients that Nera did not recognize, but which looked harmless enough. Grains of some kind, vegetables in various colors, a white substance that he called tofu. Sarah watched from a distance, her body coiled tight, ready to summon emergency services at the first sign of distress. Daniel worked slowly, explaining each step as he went. "This is rice," he said, measuring the grains into a pot. "It is the most basic food for billions of humans. I am cooking it in vegetable broth to give it flavor, but mild flavor. Nothing aggressive." He prepared the vegetables next, cutting them into small pieces with careful precision. These are all cooked very simply. Just enough heat to make them soft. No spices that would cause you harm. Finally, he prepared the tofu, pressing it gently and adding a light sauce that he had mixed himself. "This sauce is based on what I know about fleshy taste receptors. It should be savory without being overwhelming. If anything tastes wrong or uncomfortable, please stop eating immediately." He plated the meal with the same care he had shown the flowers in the greenhouse. The food looked simple but somehow inviting. Warm steam rose from the rice, carrying a scent that Nera could not identify, but which did not seem threatening. "This is what humans eat?" she asked. "This is one thing humans eat. There are thousands of variations, but at its core, our food is about nourishment and comfort." Daniel sat across from her, but did not eat. He was watching her, ready to respond if anything went wrong. Nera took a small bite of rice. The flavor spread across her tongue, warm and subtle. It was not sweet or sour or any of the extremes she had feared. It was simply kind. There was no other word for it. The food tasted kind. She tried the vegetables next. Soft, gentle, faintly earthy. Then the tofu with its delicate sauce. Each bite confirmed what the first had suggested. This was not the food of monsters. This was the food of a species that had learned to take care of each other. "Why?" Nera asked quietly. "Why would you learn to cook like this? Your world is harsh. Your survival was brutal. Why develop something so gentle?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Because survival is not enough," he said finally. "Humans learned early that we needed more than just food that kept us alive. We needed food that made us feel alive. Food that brought us together. Food that said, 'I care about you,' in a way that words sometimes cannot." He gestured at her plate. "On Earth, when you cook for someone, you're telling them they matter to you. You're using your time and energy to nourish their body and their spirit. It is one of the oldest ways we show love." Sarah had crept closer during the meal. Now she extended her long neck toward the table. "May I try some?" Daniel served her a small portion, and Nera watched her roommate taste human food for the first time. Sarah's expression shifted from suspicion to surprise to something that might have been wonder. "This is not what I expected," Sarah admitted. "Most things about humans are not what you expect," Nera said. Daniel smiled at both of them, that same soft expression she had seen in the greenhouse. "My mother used to say that hospitality means considering what others need, not just what the host prefers. A good cook adjusts their recipes for their guests." Nera set down her eating utensil and looked at him. "You speak about your people as if you're trying to prove something. Not prove, just show." Daniel began cleaning up the cooking station. "Humans know our reputation in this galaxy. We know that every species sees us as Deathworlders first and everything else second. I cannot change that reputation with arguments, but I can cook a gentle meal. I can grow gentle flowers. I can be gentle, one person at a time, until maybe the story started to change." The meal ended with a question from Nera. "Will you teach me," she asked, "to cook human food so that I can cook for you in return?" Daniel paused, surprise clear on his face. "You want to cook for me? You have shown me your world's gentleness," Nera said. "It seems only fair that I should try to return the favor." For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he nodded, and his smile was brighter than before. "I would like that very much." Administrator Vosk's office was cold. Not physically cold, though Nera's species preferred warmer environments. The coldness was in Vosk's four unblinking eyes in the rigid line of his shoulders, in the way he looked at her, like she was a specimen that had disappointed him. You have been spending considerable time with a human, Vosk said. It was not a question. Nira kept her voice steady. Daniel Wright is my laboratory partner. Our research requires collaboration. Your collaboration extends beyond the laboratory. The greenhouse, the common area. You have been seen eating together, talking, developing what appears to be a personal connection. Nira said nothing. She did not know what answer Vosk was looking for. The administrator activated a display screen. Data points appeared, charts and graphs that Nira recognized as behavioral tracking records. Since humans were admitted to this academy 3 years ago, we have seen a troubling pattern. They form bonds with other species. Deep bonds, emotional attachments that influence behavior and compromise judgment. Vosk leaned forward. They call it friendship. I call it predatory manipulation. That is absurd, Nira said before she could stop herself. Vosk's eyes narrowed. Is it? Humans evolved as pack hunters. They survived their death world by bonding with others, by creating loyalty so strong that pack members would die for each other. When they bond with species outside their pack, they're simply extending that same survival mechanism. He paused. They make you feel safe. They make you feel valued. And then you are theirs. Nira thought about Daniel's burned hands, his gentle voice talking to plants, the meal he had cooked for her with such careful consideration. That is not what I have observed, she said quietly. Your observations are compromised. That is precisely my point. Vosk stood, his tall frame casting shadows across the display. You are a promising student, Nira. Your research on aquatic flora adaptation has earned recognition across multiple systems. I would hate to see your career damaged by association with humans. Is that a threat, Administrator? It is a warning. Distance yourself from Daniel Wright. Focus on your studies. Let the human find other targets for his pack bonding instincts. Vosk moved toward the door, signaling that the meeting was over. I'm trying to protect you. In time, you'll understand that. Nira left the office with her hearts pounding and her thoughts in chaos. She found Daniel in the greenhouse, as she had expected. He was in the earth section, kneeling beside a small raised bed in the corner. As she approached, she recognized what he was tending. The Vengeful water orchid, the same plant he had burned himself to protect weeks ago. It had survived the incident and been placed in his care. And now, somehow it was thriving. New leaves had unfurled. Fresh blooms were beginning to emerge. It looked healthier than most water orchids did on their native world. You kept it alive, Nira said. Daniel looked up, startled. He had not heard her approach. I have been working on the growing conditions. Your homeworld's mineral content is difficult to replicate, but I think I found a balance that works. Voss called me to his office. Daniel's expression shifted. He set down his tools and gave her his full attention. What did he say? That you are manipulating me. That human friendship is a form of predation. That I should distance myself from you to protect my academic career. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. And what do you think? I think he is afraid. Nira sat on the edge of a planting bed, suddenly exhausted. He does not understand what you are, so he creates explanations that fit his fear. The idea that a Deathworlder might simply be kind is too foreign for him to accept. I could keep my distance, Daniel offered. His voice was gentle but sad. If it would protect you, if it would make your life here easier. Nira looked at him, this human who had thrown himself over dying flowers, who had shown her jasmine and called it gentle, who had cooked her a meal designed specifically not to hurt her. No, she said. Daniel blinked. No, you saved my life. You fed me. You grew my flowers. She gestured at the water orchid, blooming in the soft light of the earth section. That is not predation. That is not manipulation. That is friendship. Vosk will not see it that way. Then Vosk does not understand friendship. Nira stood, facing Daniel directly. I was taught to fear your species. Every story I heard said that humans were monsters, apex predators, Deathworlders who consumed poison and conquered worlds. No one told me that monsters would burn their hands for flowers. That monsters would cook gentle food for strangers. That monsters would speak to plants as if they were children who needed comfort. Daniel's eyes were bright. He swallowed hard before speaking. I was going to give this back to you, he said, gesturing at the water orchid. It belongs with someone who understands it. I was just waiting for the right moment. Nira looked at the flower from her homeworld, blooming in alien soil because a human had refused to let it die. Keep it, she said. It seems happy here. Daniel smiled, that soft expression she had come to recognize as something precious. Thank you, Nira. Thank you, Daniel, for being gentle when you could have been anything else. They stood together in the greenhouse as the station's lights shifted toward evening, surrounded by flowers from a world that the galaxy called death, grown with the same care that one might give to the most precious things in existence. Vosk would not understand. Perhaps most of the galaxy would not understand. But Nira was beginning to think that understanding was not something you received. It was something you chose to build, one gentle act at a time. The auditorium was full. Nira had never seen so many species gathered in one place. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the tiered seating, their attention focused on the raised platform where the academic review board sat in judgment. Professor Kellos was among them, his four arms folded, his ancient eyes watching everything. Administrator Vosk stood at the center podium, presenting his case. Human integration has been problematic from the beginning, he declared. Their biological capabilities make them inherently dangerous. Their psychological tendency toward pack bonding compromises the objectivity of other students. Their cultural practices, including the consumption of toxic substances, create safety hazards throughout the station. He displayed charts and statistics, incident reports, and risk assessments. A careful construction of fear dressed in the language of scientific concern. For the safety and integrity of this institution, I recommend that human admission be suspended pending further review. The auditorium murmured with discussion. Many heads nodded in agreement. Then Professor Kellos spoke. Before we proceed, the board has invited testimonies from students who have directly interacted with human classmates. Does anyone wish to speak? Silence stretched across the room. Nira felt her heart's pounding. She thought about everything she had been taught, everything she had feared, everything she had learned since a human's name appeared on her assignment sheet. She stood. The auditorium fell silent as she made her way to the testimony platform. She could feel Vosk's cold eyes on her, could sense the weight of hundreds of gazes from species she had never met. At the back of the room, she saw Daniel sitting alone. He did not smile or nod or give her any signal. He simply waited. My name is Nira, she began. I'm a Valeshi student in the Xenobotany program. When I learned that my laboratory partner would be a human, I was terrified. My species taught me that humans were monsters. Death-worlders who consumed poison and conquered their world through endurance and violence. I believed every warning I had ever heard. She paused, gathering her thoughts. My partner's name is Daniel Wright. In our first week, he noticed my fear and kept his distance. He spoke softly. He moved slowly. He offered to work on opposite ends of our station to make me comfortable. She looked at Vosk. Is that the behavior of a predator? To make yourself smaller so that others feel safe. The auditorium was silent. A few weeks later, there was an accident. A container of flowers from my homeworld was broken. The distress spores could have killed me. Daniel threw himself over the broken container and contained the release with his own body. He suffered chemical burns on his hands. When I asked him why, he said that my flowers were too beautiful to let them die. She saw movement among the audience. Faces shifting, expressions changing. He showed me the earth section of the greenhouse. I expected to see poison plants and weapons designed by nature. Instead, I saw jasmine and lavender and chamomile. Flowers that humans use for healing, for comfort, for peace. When I asked if the jasmine was poisonous, Daniel smiled and said, "This one is actually gentle. We use it to help us sleep." Nira took a deep breath. He cooked for me. Human food, prepared specifically so that nothing would harm my Valeshi system. He explained that on Earth, cooking for someone is a way of showing care. He said hospitality means considering what others need, not just what the host prefers. She turned to address the full auditorium. I was taught that humans were monsters. I was not taught that monsters would burn their hands to save flowers. That monsters would cook gentle food for strangers. That monsters would grow beauty in quarantine and speak to plants as if they were frightened children who needed comfort. Her voice grew stronger. Administrator Vosk calls human friendship a form of predation. He says their kindness is manipulation, their care is conquest. But I have seen Daniel Wright tend to a water orchid for my world until it bloomed more beautifully than it ever would have at home. Is that predation? Is that conquest? Or is it simply what happens when someone chooses to be gentle when they could have been anything else? She looked at Daniel. He was sitting very still, his eyes bright. Daniel once told me that Jasmine was gentle, but I think he was describing himself. Nira returned to her seat. The auditorium remained silent for a long moment. Then Professor Kellos spoke. Are there other testimonies? More students stood. Some Nira recognized from the dining hall, from corridors, from laboratories where other humans worked. One by one, they share their own stories. A human who had helped repair a damaged dormitory without being asked. Another who had taught a homesick student the songs from her world. A third who had stayed up all night helping a struggling classmate understand difficult coursework. The review board deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, Kellos announced their decision. Human integration will continue. Furthermore, we recommend expanded cultural exchange programs to help address the misconceptions that have been allowed to flourish. Vosk said nothing. His cold eyes swept the auditorium once. Then he departed through the side exit. That evening, Nira found Daniel in the greenhouse. He was tending to the water orchid, as she had expected. Its blooms were even more beautiful than before. Thank you, he said when he saw her. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. Nira held up a small container. I brought something. She had spent the afternoon with Sara, preparing a Valeshi delicacy using ingredients safe for human consumption. It had taken 3 attempts and several consultations with the station's nutritional database. But the result looked close to what her mother used to make. I thought it was my turn to cook for you, she said. Daniel took the container and opened it carefully. The scent was unfamiliar to him, something between sweet and savory with undertones he could not identify. He took a small bite. His face shifted through surprise, then appreciation, then something warmer. This is wonderful, he said. What is it called? My people call it morning tide. We eat it when we want to celebrate something. What are we celebrating? Nira looked at the water orchid blooming between them, at the jasmine climbing its trellis nearby, at all the gentle things growing in this corner of a station that hung among the stars. Understanding, she said. Daniel smiled. That soft expression she had once feared and now treasured. This one is actually gentle too, he said, gesturing at her dish. Nira smiled back. I learned from the best. They sat together in the greenhouse, sharing food from 2 different worlds, surrounded by flowers that had bloomed because someone had chosen to be kind. And somewhere beyond the walls, the galaxy continued to turn, carrying with it the beginning of a new story about humans. Not monsters, not predators, not deathworlders to be feared, just people, gentle when they chose to be, kind when it mattered, which, Nira was beginning to understand, was almost always